Okay, well, we are at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar tonight. We are thrilled to have the fabulous Rob Tomlinson here to present. Robert Tomlinson is the co-founder of the Institute of Natural Health Technologies and Bioenergetic Intolerance Elimination. Robert's devotion to the field of allergy research, immunology, electromagnetism, and biophysics have given him insight into the root causes of disease. Robert has done extensive study in the science and practice of iridology and practices various iridology methods. Registered bioenergetics practitioner and holistic nutritionist. His studies include quantum and biophysics, homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, herbology, and holistic nutrition. Robert teaches iridology in professional practice in our continuing education program. So thank you so much, Rob, for being here. Just want to let everyone know that we are going to have the presentation. Rob's going to present to us. And if you have questions along the way, please put them into the chat and the Q&A, and we will answer all of your questions after our presentation. So thank you so much, Rob, and I will give you the floor.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. For those of you who tuned in last week, I do apologize. We had some computer gremlins in here, and there's an old saying, basically, I can't even remember the old saying, so that's how bad it was. But really, everything seems to be right. It should be so easy to just go ahead and do this, but there's some little technical thing. And honestly, I'm not a technical guy. And for me to try to sit and figure out technical problems and try to figure them out, frankly, I'd rather put a campfire out with my face. But I love sharing you with what I'm excited about. And hopefully we're not going to have any problems this time. I'm going to take off my face because you don't want to see that anyway. And I'm going to go through some iridology. Now, some of you, I can't see you raise your hand, but I want to see how many people. I would like to know. You can ask yourselves basically how many people have actually had iridology done before versus how many people have actually heard of it. Now, back when I first started. I've been an iridologist now for about 25 years, but back then it was not a common thing in North America at all. There's resident iridologists on staff in hospitals in Germany, Netherlands, Italy, Korea, China. You have to be a medical doctor to be an iridologist in Russia. In Australia, they work in conjunction with the doctors in the clinics, and the doctors fill prescriptions based on what the iridologist finds. That's not even heard of here. So when we work in hospitals, we work in conjunction with we work in trauma wards. When a patient comes in a coma in a trauma ward and there's no bleeding and bruising, you can't ask them what happened. So they have to ask the resident iridologist to come down and assist the surgeons and tell them what's going on, because the eyes actually record that information. We also work with forensic pathologists doing autopsies to tell them probable causes of death in certain countries. South America, Central America, it's a university degree to be an iridologist. Just nobody knows what an iridologist here is in North America, unfortunately. It's starting to pick up popularity. I know a lot of iridologists. I know there's about 20 iridology teachers in North America, so it's not a common thing like it is in Europe. So anyway, I'm going to start with this. I'll get rid of my face here so you don't have to stare at my face all this time. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go through this with you, but first I want to say it's pronounced iridology, not iridology. A lot of people refer to it as iridology, but it's the study of the eye, not the ear. Just kidding. But it's the true term. The actual term used to come from, it was called ophthalmic somatic analysis. So it was a mouthful. And then it was later coined iridology. I'll explain that. So a little bit about the background, the theory and the philosophy of iridology, the birth of iridology. Basically, the picture you're seeing here was on ancient papyruses in the National Museums of Cairo and Alexandria temples in Luxor or whatever. And they're several thousand years old. And here you can see a priest doing an analysis on one of the pharaoh's eyes. And they could tell there's there's problems in the body through the eyes. If there's sickness or whatever, they were able to do that. Well, that's even way back then they were doing that. The ancient Chaldeans, which I'm going to show you here, ancient Chaldeans, 2000 BC were doing that. And they noticed there was definitely changes in the eyes when different people were feeling different illnesses. The Chinese Ming Dynasty documentations date back to 1300 to 1600, where they're showing actual drawings of the eyes and the little blood vessels in the white part of the eye called the sclera. And they're able to tell various illnesses people are going through by the certain lines and where they appeared on the line, on the eyes. And it wasn't till the early 1900s or 19th century, should be, Ignaz von Pexley, he coined the term iridology. Ignaz von Pexley was a doctor that worked in a college hospital, and that afforded him the opportunity to look at a lot of the patient's eyes during, after operations, before operations, or sicknesses or illnesses or accidents or whatever. And he started noticing there was changes in the eye when there was a problem in the body. Now, what he did document is anything on the left side of the body showed up in the left eye. If it was on the right side of the body, it showed up on the right eye. And so he started jotting this down and working with it and putting a lot of time into it. Now, what doctors typically do is they're going to take a scope and they're going to look at the pupil at the back of the eye, up the optic disc, the optic nerve, and the retina. And they have an overall idea what's going on in the body, but they neglect to look at the most important part, in my view, is the irids. Now there's iris, and plural, as we call it, is irids, but the actual term for double eyes, like both irises, called irides, which kind of sounds crazy to me. We're used to, most iridologists I know just say the irids, plural, instead of irides. It's like saying I fell and skinned my kneesies or whatever. So most iridologists I know just refer to it as irids instead, for plural. Okay, so let's go on. Now, the first thing I want to show you is the true blue iris. There are two colors that are true colors, true blue and then true brown, which I'll show you in a minute. But you can see there's just all blue fibers. And that's just, you're either born with a blue eye, and actually pretty much everybody is born with a dark, dark blue eye. Even the brown-eyed people, they're born with a dark, dark, dark blue eye. And then over time, within a few weeks, the eye starts turning brown. Or after a while, it starts turning into a hazel color. Or it continues being a lighter blue color, or even a greeny color. What does that mean? What do the colors mean? Which I'll get into in a few minutes. But here's a true brown eye. You can see it's chocolate brown. So looking at most people's eyes would be similar to this one. This is called a mixed iris, which is a cross between a blue and a brown eye. This is what's called your hazel eyes or light brown eyes. But a true brown eye, like people from Asia or the West Indies or something, or Africa, they'll have mostly these true dark chocolate brown eyes. And but the genetically mixed is just, over time, the blues and brown eyes mixing and what have you. Now, typically, let's go back a couple here and I'll show you this. True blue eyes. Now, I'm going to just say overall, I'm going to give you enough information here to tickle your ears and pique your interest here. But blue-eyed people, now don't quote me because not every single person with blue eyes is going to have this, but generally blue-eyed people are going to have problems with urogenital areas, or they're going to have problems with the respiratory or something like that. That's very typical with blue-eyed individuals that tend to have those genetic weaknesses in their body. The typical brown eye, or another name for that is called a hematogenic eye. The typical brown-eyed people will usually have problems with liver or colon malfunctions, or there are, I could say, insufficiencies because maybe they're not eliminating toxins enough from the colon, and their liver tends to be a little bit more toxic. Brown-eyed people tend to have a lot more acidity build up in their body, either uric acid or whatever, and that's typical. But you can have a blue-eyed person with those same things. They're building up a lot of acid in their body. You can have blue-eyed people who have problems with their colon and whatever. So it's just generalizing, saying brown-eyed people mostly have this issue. Blue-eyed people typically have this issue. And then the mixed-eyed people, as we call them, biliary. The biliary eye, or the brown mixed eyes, whatever, they are typically people who deal with blood sugar issues, or they'll have a problem with things like dairy, a lot of times just sugar and dairy products and whatever. But they'll typically have an issue with just blood sugar regulation in general, but they can all have a mixture of different things. So let's go on a little bit. Now, one of the first things we look for as an iridologist is we look for the strength of a constitution. A constitution is the makeup of the eye. You notice how close these fibers are together, very tightly packed in there, very delicate fibers all brought together. Now, let's talk about those fibers. Do you know that 65% of all the nerves in the brain travel through the eyes? 65% of the nerves travel through the eyes. And so what they do is they form these little bundles. I'm just trying to draw it with my little cursor here. They knit these little bundles, and then the nerves leave. They go from the brain, that is, through the eyes. Then they leave the optic nerve, optic thalami, down the spinal cord to the organ or tissue, and then back up the spine to the brain, through the eyes. There's a continuous loop of nerve fiber between the brain, the eyes, and the tissue in the body. And anytime there's some kind of disorder in the body, be it atrophy, which is a breaking down, inflammation, subluxation, pinching of a nerve, anything like that, some kind of disorder, inflammation, pain, it will tell the brain tells the eyes. And what typically happens is you start getting changes in the actual tissues in the eye, which I'll be getting into. I'll show you a little bit later. Okay, now, if it's the left side of the body, it will show up in the left eye. If it's the right side of the body, it shows up in the right side. Except the brain. The brain the left side will represent the right hemisphere of the brain, and the right eye at the top here represents the right side of the body, left side of the body. Sorry, right eye, left side of the body, and left eye, right side of the body. I'm trying to do that, say that 3 times fast. So anyway, the strong constitution, that means you're able to hold on to vitamins, nutrients, and minerals. Your ability to resist sickness and disease is actually quite high, and your potential longevity is really high. Someone like this, for example, could live to be 100, no problem, if they take care of themselves, of course. Now, the other thing we want to look at is the weak constitution. Now, you can see this. You don't even have to be a trained iridologist. You can see how loose these fibers are. They're spread out. So if you were to say, what would hold on to nutrients more? A bowl like this, if this is a bowl, well, the tighter together, they tend to hold on, they would hold water better than something like this. It's got a lot of holes through it. So the person with a strong constitution here, that is a person that will hold on to lots of vitamins and nutrients. Whereas the weak constitution, they do not hold on to vitamins and nutrients very well. They tend to go through their body. So this person, when you look at someone's eye, and you can see an eye even a foot away. You can look at someone's eye and say that's a strong weak constitution, judging by how tight those fibers are. So if they're really weak like this or loose, that's an indication that they're not able to hold on to vitamins, nutrients, minerals. They tend to get sick anytime something goes around. Someone, like kind of cold or flu or whatever, and then they catch it. Whereas a strong constitutions very rarely get sick. They're able to resist it very well. This person here, now, if you have a weak constitution, that doesn't mean you can't live as long as a strong constitution person. It just means you really have to baby yourself. So one of the important things that we do is we look at the constitution so I'll know what kind of program to put this person on. A person with a weak constitution tends to need a lot more nutrients. They need a lot more minerals for this weak constitution type of person to build. They're already weak. You don't want to cleanse a weak organ or weak tissue. You want to build it up. Whereas a strong constitution, it's already strong. I don't have to build it so much. It's more like cleanse. You see this orange here? See that? That's toxin in the body. You didn't see that with a weak constitution as much. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you're a strong constitution, you're going to have more toxins, and a weak one won't. But the weak constitutions, you just really want to focus on building. The strong constitutions, you spend more time cleansing than you do building because they're already strong. Now, whatever you're born with, if you're born with a weak constitution, you'll die with a weak constitution. If you're born with a strong constitution, you'll die with a strong constitution. So now, how could I say this? If I was saying the strong constitution could live to be 100 easy, so can this. So if I compare these constitutions to, let's say, wood constitutions, the first one would be like oak. So let's say I make an oak table out of this really strong wood, and this one would be pine. Actually, in this case, it's probably more like balsa wood. It's really, really soft, porous wood. So which one would last longer? A tough oak table or a soft pine or balsa wood table? Well, obviously, the oak table can take a lot more abuse, and they can endure a lot more than this one can. But if I really baby this pine or balsa wood table, it will last as long as the strong constitution or the oak table. So in this case, if you have a weak constitution, you just have to baby yourself. You can't get away with it. I remember this old actor, he lived to be 100 years old, and his name was George Burns. And every time you saw him, he was smoking a cigar and he was always drinking. He says, geez, if I had known if I was going to live so long, I would have taken care of myself. But the weak constitutions would never get away with that kind of thing for a long period of time. So looking at someone's eye, I know if their body can handle a lot of abuse, if they really need to build more, spend more time building up or whatever. So this is a handy thing when you're looking at. Now, a weak constitution, usually if you're going to give them a supplement or some kind of a nutrient, they're going to have to take more of it than a strong constitution would, because they just tend not to hold it. So that's the one thing that we start with, looking at the constitution type. Now let's look at the basic iris markings. If you'll notice, these are what's called open and closed lacuna. Now, the lacuna is what we iridologists will call a split in the fiber. Remember, the nerves in the brain travel through the eyes. They knit these bundles, then they leave the optic nerve, optic thalami, down the spinal cord to the organ or tissue, back up to the brain, and it's a continuous loop. So anytime there's a weakness in the body, the fibers will split, and you can see that happening right here at about 9 o'clock, and there's one up here at 12 o'clock, and then some off to the side here, just about 3:30, whatever, one at about 4:30 here. So you can see those splits in the fiber. That's what we look for. So because everywhere we see a split in the fiber, we know that's an area of weakness in the body. Now, the interesting thing is when the fibers, let's say, when you see a fiber and it's open on one end, see this one is closed over here, but this side is open. So that means it's an open lacuna. lacunae for plural. And closed would be something like this one here at about 4:30. Okay, it's closed on both ends. When it's closed, this indicates this is what this person was born with. It's an inherited weakness in this person's body. Here's another one here. Here's another one here. These are inherited weaknesses. But when they're open on one end, that's acquired weakness. That means this person developed this weakness in their body over time. This happens to be the thyroid. This person they weren't born with a weak thyroid. They developed this over time. This is just a part of the brain. I don't really want to get into it right now. It's a part of the brain that gives a person vitality. So they're probably not as vital and full of life as they were as a kid. But this is how we tell if something's inherited or if it's acquired. Acquired, again, is an open-ended split in the fiber, and inherited one is something that's closed on both ends. Okay. Now, there's a chart that I threw on here for you. I've been teaching iridology probably for about 20 years. And so my students would say, wow, there's just so much to look at. Is there some way that you can come up with a chart that would make it easier for new students to learn to analyze an eye? We don't diagnose, we analyze. So we're just looking at the fibers, and we can see where areas of weakness, inherent weaknesses or strengths are in the body, where toxicity is, where there's inflammation, things like that. So I did this chart up back in 2003, but I just suggested when you're going and you're doing an analysis, you go through in order of color here. So we start with the digestion and assimilation, then eliminative channels, and then circulatory and lymphatic. And then we get into other things like the strength of the nervous system. And then we look at the lacunae last, all the splits in the fiber. But anyway, I just wanted to show you, I can go back between these two, and you can see this person, see this split right here. Now, this is the left eye we're looking at, and this split is around 9 o'clock. So if I looked over here, here's the left eye. Now you'll notice it says right on the left side and left on the right side. That's the way you're looking at the patient. So that's their left and their right. It's opposite to you because you're facing them. So you can see on this side, that was that split in the fiber. That's the person's thyroid. So that's what we do. We basically look at the iris, irids. We can see what areas are imbalanced or weak in the body, and then we can just check on the map and we can tell you what the area of weakness is in the body. So that's all it is. Okay. Now, there's little things that we look for. I'm going to show you a few markings. Obviously, this is going to be Iridology 101. I mean, this is so basic, but I'm just showing you the basic things that you, even though you're not an iridologist and you're watching this webinar, you'll be able to look at people's eyes and you'll have an idea what's going on. Now, if you're not an iridologist, I don't want you going around analyzing everybody and telling them all their weaknesses in the body. Nothing scares somebody more than that. Excuse me. So what I do want to show you is the different colors. See this brown pigment? And so they're called hyperpigmentations. The old iridology terminology for that would be called SORA, but that's PSORA. But what it meant is chemical deposits. So when we start seeing chemical deposits in the body like this, this is an indication that they've had some kind of medicine, chemicals, and it might not have been something they took as a medicine, but it might have been, I'm working with chemicals with my hands, or I'm walking with my feet on a lot on grass that's been fertilized or whatever, and maybe the toxins absorbed through the body. Typically, what you do see when you see these dark brown, almost black spots on the body, or in the eye, I should say, that's usually indicative of a person who's had antibiotics because they tend to show up as dark brown like that. Now, this is really interesting. I'm going to tell you some really cool stuff. Now, Harvard Medical School got in this between 1976 and 1994, and they took 20,000 people and they took photos of their eyes and they made them fill out extensive questionnaires on their personalities, their likes, their dislikes, everything about their body, who are they closer to, mother, father, whatever. And they found out that these patterns and markings and colors in the eye seem to match their personality. Now, so let me just give you some basics here. When we see yellow in an eye, you can see some yellow color down here at around 7:30, 8 o'clock. See, if this was a clock, this is how I'm marking it. So 12 and 1 and 2 and 3. So when I'm seeing down the bottom here, even around 4 o'clock, there's a little bit of a yellowish color. If you look at it, there tends to be an overall yellow haze over top of the whole eye, giving it a green hue. So if I take a blue eye and I put a yellow haze over top of it, what color do I get? That's your green eyes. Now, why is that there? There's no such thing as a genetically green eye. And I've had people say, well, that's crazy, Rob. I've always had green eyes. Actually, everybody on planet Earth was born with a dark blue eye, but then it genetically changed within a matter of weeks to either brown or blue or hazel or green. So now, but why is that? When we humans go through different emotions, there is a part of the brain, it's called hypothalamus. The hypothalamus releases these chemicals called neuropeptides. Now, they've discovered around 272 different neuropeptides. And there's about, I won't tell you how many, but 270 that they've discovered. But what happens when you go through different emotions, the hypothalamus releases these different neuropeptides, and when they mix with the toxins that are existing in the body, by the way, toxins are clear or cloudy, they're really colorless. But when the neuropeptides, certain neuropeptides mix with those toxins, there is a chemical reaction that changes the color of that toxin. So we can pretty much tell what emotion released the neuropeptide that turned the toxin that color. So when I see yellow in an eye, I know that this person is a worrier. And worry means anxiety, worry, concern, fears, things like that. And the more yellow I see in the eye, I know the person's they have more fear in their body and or in their life, fear, worry, concern, whatever. And I've had this one person say, that's not me. I'm not a worrier, but yet you've got very green eyes. The eyes never lie. And it's not that this person was lying to me, but they may have just been so used to their habitual patterns of dealing with emotional things that they never realized there was an issue there of fear or worry or concern. So I said, you don't worry. Never. I've never worried about anything in my life. Have you ever? So I changed the word after a while. I said, do you ever have any concerns in your life? Oh, yeah, I got lots of concerns. Well, what's a concern based on? If I don't get to the bank by 3, I'm going to miss it and I won't be able to deposit this check. So what's the outcome? I'll be in a lot of trouble tomorrow. So there's based on fear somehow. Okay, see where I'm going with this. So really, the eyes always tell you what's going on. We're not reading eyes. Let's get this straight. We are not psychic people. We're not reading your eyes. I'm just analyzing it based on color, based on the topography of the eye, blood vessels, things like that, which I'll get into a little bit later. So let's talk about that yellow. I was fearing, worrying, concerned about something. The neuropeptide mixed with the toxin turns it yellow, and that same neuropeptide that turned the toxin yellow starts to affect the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland is actually right down here, right almost 6 o'clock. And so what that tells me is that same thing that caused that neuropeptide that caused fear works with the adrenals, and the adrenals are affected. So now I'm going to get into that in a little bit, exactly what the adrenals do. They actually work with stress, but they do something else as well. When I see orange in an eye, I know that person now it's a dark orange, so that means there's a long-term lack of joy in this person's life. Really interesting. And so obviously you're not looking at a person saying, I don't see joy in your eye. I'm seeing orange in an eye, and orange is from a neuropeptide when you lack joy. And don't get this confused with happiness. You can be happy, but not necessarily full of joy, because maybe there's lots of stress in your life and things are going on right now, but I'm content. That's happy, but I cannot go to the top of the roof and scream at the top of my lungs, I love life. So that's a person who's full of joy. But in this case, A lack of joy just means there's lots of stuff and happenings and circumstances in their life that just have taken away their joy. Again, they could be happy. But when it mixes with toxin, turns it orange. But that same neuropeptide that turned that orange affects the pancreas. So now I've got two things. The yellow sent out a neuropeptide affect the adrenals. The orange is a neuropeptide that was sent out, mixed with the toxin, turned it. It affects the pancreas. So now I've got two things. I've got adrenals and pancreas. Those two things, the adrenals and pancreas, work with a person's blood sugar. And the other one I want to show you is the brown color here. See that? When I see brown in an eye or brown toxin, that is usually from now, they're, like I said earlier, they're little spots like this. This indicates that they've had chemical. But chemicals don't go in brown like that or red brown. They go in clear. But what caused them to stain that color was the neuropeptide when the person went through anger. And when anger neuropeptide is mixed with the toxin, turns it brown, that same neuropeptide affects the liver. So now I've got yellow adrenals, orange pancreas, brown liver, the three organs that work to balance blood sugar. So if you look at somebody's eye, and I'm telling you this to you practitioners that are out there that may be sitting across from a client or whatever, and you're trying to help them with their diet or whatever, one thing you want to look at is if you see yellow or orange or brown or a combination thereof in a person's eye, you know, and you can take this to the bank, they have blood sugar metabolism disorders. That doesn't mean they're going to have diabetes. It doesn't mean they have diabetes. It means their body is struggling to maintain proper homeostasis with blood sugar. And here's another interesting thing too. Do you see how the toxins are all towards the center? They're not spread out through the whole eye. They're all pulled in around the center. Harvard Medical School looked at that and they said, well, this is really interesting. When we see color that's tucked around the pupil like that, that's a sign of an introverted individual. If you tend to hold in emotions, the colors stick very closely to the pupil. If you're an extrovert, it tends to spread out through the whole eye. And I'll probably have some other pictures I can show you that later. Now, another thing too, Harvard Medical School said, these little hyperpigmentations, these little spots in the eye, that's also seen in a person, and this is their observation, that loves control. Oh boy. And the more dots you have in an eye, I can guarantee the person loves more control. I love to have control. I don't like to be told what to do. I don't like being shoved into a box or, borders around. They like to be in control and they love details and they need to know why. Why? Why do I have to do this? Because I said so. My parents, that's my parents. What, you have to go to bed. Why? Because I said so. So I was always questioning because I have a couple of those dots in my eyes too. But the more dots you have, the more control you like. So that's just a little interesting thought that you would not necessarily have to know for your client sitting in front of you if you're doing nutrition or whatever. But the main thing I wanted to show you is the colors. Yellow, orange, or brown. If you see any of that anywhere, and it might be just a little brown spot like you're seeing it around 2 o'clock, or a little bit of yellow down here, or a little orange spot down here. If you just see that, that's all you see. It doesn't matter. Either yellow or orange or brown, they are still going to be dealing with blood sugar issues. So they've got to watch eating sugary things or starchy carbohydrates that convert to sugar in the body. Watch your bread, watch your potato chips, things like that. All right. So it's not just sugar per se. Okay. Now, as a nutritionist or someone who's interested in this kind of thing, you can just have some kind of a magnifying glass. You got a decent magnifying glass. I've got one that's 10-time magnification. If you just hold it over someone's eye, you can see this as clear as we're looking at it here. Now, there is a jagged line. I'm going to bring this back a few slides just so you can see this chart. There's a jagged line, and I'm looking at the right here. It's 1/3 of the way out, and it should be fairly round, but it should be 1/3 of the way out. Oops, pardon me, I went back. I hit the button up by mistake. It should be 1/3 of the way from the pupil, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it should be 1/3 of the way out from the pupil to the edge of the iris. That is normal. That's a normal condition. The closer that this line pulls towards the pupil, the more introverted a person is. The further out it goes from the pupil, the more extroverted a person is. So, and it should be fairly round and consistent. So let's go ahead a couple again, and we'll see what happens. Now, I want you to see this person. I'm going to trace it, and you follow me, okay? It goes down here, shoots out like this, goes up here like this, and bounces around, comes down to here. It's actually kind of hard to trace this one. Goes out to here, and it goes down all of a sudden, and then back up again. So you can see it's kind of all over the place. That's not really round. That's not the round we want to see. So when you see that, where it seems to be pulling in, this is called a spasm in the colon. The colon should be fairly round. All of a sudden, that circle should be round, I should say, and which means a consistently normal colon. But when you see that this line is pulled in quickly, like at the top of the eye here, is sharply towards the pupil, that means the colon has a spasm or a stricture in it. That's more just a spasm. It just kind of pulls it and it spasms for a bit and then opens back up again. So this person is going to experience a lot of, gastrointestinal, abdominal pains every once in a while, or stomach aches. So that's just very typical of the spastic bowel. I recommend this person take magnesium, like a magnesium citrate or something like that. That should help them out. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on these things because I'm just trying to give you an example. Now, here's an example of a ballooned bowel. This gentleman walked in. His stomach was sticking about 2 feet from the front of him. I mean, it was just huge stomach, but he wasn't a fat person. He was a fairly thin guy, but his stomach was huge. And he referred to this as his fuel tank for a love machine, or Molson muscle, or whatever he was referring to it. But anyway, it was his gut. And what happened is, so let me draw this line now. So you can see it go way out to here at around 3 o'clock. And then it pulled in a bit, and it comes in. So this is a big balloon on the colon. You can actually see the shape. If you see an ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid, well, you can see it ballooning way out over here, then it pulls in a bit, then balloons out again down at the bottom. And so now, remember I said that jagged line, the further out it goes, the more extroverted a person. This person's the life of the party. He was just like the kind of guy everyone wants to invite to a party. But his colon was sticking out. That's his swollen colon. When the colon gets impacted, it can't swell up through the diaphragm region in the chest. It can't go to the pelvic regions. It can't go back through the spine. So the only place it's got to expand is outwards. And this is why these guys get these big Molson muscles or fuel tanks for love machines, as I was saying earlier. So basically, the further out that goes, this is more impaction in this person's colon. They definitely need to do some work on their colon, get some fiber and exercise and whatever. Here's another one here. You can see it moving around here like this, but you notice it's flat. It goes flat right across. That means the transverse colon is just dropped right down, and it's resting on the bladder. For a female, when you see a line go right across the top, like you'll be able to see that with you had a scope and look at someone's eye. If you see it drop straight across like that, that's an indication. It's called prolapsus of the transverse colon. It's prolapsed, it's resting on the bladder. And when you're 45 years old, the average 45-year-old has 10 pounds, I'm sorry, that's 5 kilos, basically, of fecal matter in the colon. And gravity pulls that down. Well, you've got 5 kilos pushing down on the bladder. And so any bump you go over. So one of the questions I ask when I'm doing an exam with the iridologist, the students, I say, why is it this person having a hard time traveling in cars? And the answer is because they've got a prolapsed colon that's resting on their bladder. So they're feeling every bump of the road when they got to pee. And we have to keep making frequent stops because my bladder just can't hold it. So that was another interesting thing. So venous congestion, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I don't want to take too much time. We want to allow for some time at the end. These are just some basics for you anyway. Venous congestion is this blue hue out here. You see, this is the edge of the iris here. You can see it kind of going up along here. But above that, on the white part of the eye called the sclera, there's all this blue hue out there. like a rainbow. And you can see it at the bottom too. It seems to be like bleeding out from the eye onto the white of the eye. This is called a lunula. When you see this blue hue, that's indicative of a person who is low in iron. They're very, very hard time. They're not assimilating iron, or not maintaining iron, proper iron levels in the body. So whenever you see this blue hue, and it can be on a true dark brown eye as well, you'll see a blue haze around the outside. And it also, but any color eye, you can see this blue. It will be blue on the white of the eye. So that when you see that, you know that that person is low on iron. All right, now, here's something else we see. This white cap at the top of the eye, the North American iridologists refer to this, they call it arcus senilis. And really, they've joined iridologists associations around the world have just kind of all gotten together and said, we need to come up with a consistent verbiage for iridologists to use. We're not allowed to diagnose, so we can't say arcus senilis, because that's basically the root word of that is senility. We can't be diagnosing senility. But this is what happens with this person. This is the circulatory zone. It goes around the eye like this. You can see it's kind of cloudy right here. And so this is basically the circulatory, it goes around the whole eye. But if it's really congested at the top, you see this white cap. This is indicative of the arteries, or the cerebral arteries. The arteries in the head are all congested. It's a little bit what's considered atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. And now that could be from having too much fat and cholesterol buildup, or it could be calcification up there. Regardless, they're having a difficult getting circulation to the brain. So the first thing to go is your short-term memory loss. This does not mean Alzheimer's. This just means I'm not getting enough blood flow. I remember a party I was at 20 years ago. I remember who was there, who was wearing what. I remember conversations we've had. But this is more for a person who just walks in the room and says, what the heck was I just coming in here for? I can't even remember what I was coming in. I was just talking. I was just saying something. What was it? That kind of person. That's what this does. It causes short-term memory loss. This person, poor person, could probably, that's pretty congested. So this person could probably hide their own Easter eggs, if you know what I mean. They just can't remember where I put anything. So that's typical. If you see that in a person's eye, you know that they have a hard time metabolizing or either calcium or fats or whatever, and it settles in the arteries of the brain, and this person is having a hard time remembering, that's all. So you need to put them on a program like fatty acids or something like that, something to increase the circulation of the brain. If you know anything about herbs, you might want to try something called ginkgo biloba, gotu kola. There's different herbs you can use for that. Now, this is also another, when it's all around the whole eye. You see, it's not just at the top anymore. It's around the entire circulatory. So this person, obviously, the whole body is congested. It's not just the cerebral vessels in the brain, okay? Another thing I want to show you is the brown in the sclera, the white part of the eye. See the brown spots? Very typical with your true brown eye or your hematogenic eye, same thing. When you see the brown on the white of the eye, that's an indication that they have liver hardening. There's bacteria in the liver. Now, it's not a dangerous situation to be in. Oh my gosh, you go see a doctor. No. You just need to do liver cleanse. When you start seeing this melanin, you just know you need to do liver cleanses. And this is, like I said earlier, a hematogenic or a true brown eye. It's very typical for them to have to do liver cleanses because liver is usually toxic. All right, so moving on. We don't have that much time. I'm just going to show you another few things. This dark ring around the outside, the very periphery of the eye is very dark like that. The darker it is, the more weaker the skin is. But there's an emotion behind this, according to Harvard Medical School. When we see this dark ring here, we call that it's basically the ring of purpose. Like, what's my purpose in life? But it's also an indication that the person has a low self-esteem. They tend to get hurt easy. You know, there's no expression. You need to have a thick skin because you get hurt too easy. Well, that's this person. When you see that dark rim around there, now this is a beautiful eye. And this is typically what I see when I see these mascara commercials or photos of these beautiful models with their gorgeous blue eyes, or even brown eyes. You can see that dark ring around there, but it's easier to see in a blue. But when you see that dark ring, that's typical. I see of a lot of these supermodels. Why would a supermodel have a dark ring around their eye when they're so beautiful? A lot of them suffer with self-esteem issues. I'm just generalizing when I say that, obviously not all of them, but that's very typical. So the darker the ring, the more insecure somebody is. Now, this is interesting. These furrows like this, these dark lines like that. There's another term that the North Americans use called radii solaris, like rays of the sun, but the new modern way of saying is radial furrows. And it's an indication that this person has a slow moving toxic colon. And when you have a slow moving toxic colon, you have a really good environment to build parasites in the body. And so typically when you see this, it doesn't necessarily mean this person has worms. A layman iridologist say, oh, that's a sign of worms. No, it's not. It's a sign of a slow moving toxic colon with the potential to develop parasites. Well, this person may have just come off a parasite cleanse and they'll still have the lines there. They will have the lines until that colon cleans out. They're used to taking lots of fiber. Maybe they want to do colonics or something and clean that out. And when they do, those lines will disappear over time. So I know what everybody does. As soon as I'm done this, they're going to go to the washroom, look in the mirror, and they look for these dark lines. I know what you're all thinking. I've been doing this long enough. Everyone worries about, oh no, I don't want to see parasite lines. Well, if you do, okay. It's not a parasite line, like I said, just means you clean out your colon, but it would probably not hurt you to take a good parasite detox protocol as well. Okay. This is another sign that we see, these little dots, dot. You see them all the way around? The North American iridologists refer to that as lymphatic rosary because they look like rosary beads. The proper term is called lymphatic tophi. These little spots are indicative of lymph nodes. The lymph nodes are congested all around a person's body. Now, that's not a disease in itself, but it basically says this person has a very overactive immune system. It's very, very active. So they're very prone to ear, nose, and throat irritations. When you see these dots around the outside, you know that person will tend to have a lot of sinus issues. They have to blow their nose usually every morning, clear it. They're very prone to sinus problems in the spring and summer and whatever like that. Maybe they have a problem with dust and molds and perfumes and things like that and danders. Okay. So something to cleanse their lymph node out. That these people here, they tend to do more, they need to do more exercise to get the lymph fluid flowing, and that tends to clean out the lymph nodes better. Okay. This is another one, very interesting. See all these rings here? Those are called contraction furrows. This is indicative of a person who's high stress. The actual term for this is called anxiety tetanic, not Titanic, tetanic. So these rings here are indicative of a person that holds in stress. So they may not even realize how much stress they're under. They just hold everything in and hold everything in. I guarantee by the time they get this bad, when they say you've got 4 or 5 rings in a row, if you haven't had a nervous breakdown, you're about to, and that's pretty close to the truth. But those are rings. This is an 8-year-old child. This picture is of an 8-year-old child. Why is this child at 8 years old so stressed? That's crazy. So what we say to this person is like, you need magnesium. The really deep etched lines, meaning you're lacking magnesium. If they're very fine lines, that's a potassium deficiency. So usually I just say, you're better to take magnesium. Your body can manufacture potassium from magnesium, but not the other way around. So this person definitely needs some magnesium, maybe a bisglycinate or magnesium and taurine or something to keep the magnesium in the body longer, to relax all the muscles, blood vessels, etc. Okay. I'm not even getting into this. Just when you see a ring in the eye, I'll just talk about it quickly. When you see the right around the pupil like that, that's the stomach zone. So if I see a dark halo like this, or even a bright halo like this. This is an indication they've got digestive issues. Something's off with the balance of their stomach. The whiter the line is, the more over acid they are. The darker the ring is, the more under acid. Regardless, they're going to get belching and burping and whatever. That's very common. I'm actually going to be doing a webinar next month to a lot of practitioners that are actually talking about how can you tell if someone has an underacid stomach without having to do any tests. There's other different symptoms you can look at. But this person has an underacid stomach. So they're going to get a lot of bloating. Adrenal exhaustion. Here's another one real quick. I got to make this quick because I want to have time for some questions at the end. But a very large pupil like this, if you see them all the time in normal room lighting, when you see a very large pupil, that's indicative of a person who is high stress. This is adrenal exhaustion, been under stress for years, long time. And it just tends to exhaust their adrenals. Adrenals tend to hold the pupil tight. When you walk into a bright room, the pupil should shrink right down. You go in the dark, it opens up. But the adrenals are trying to hold it. But if they're exhausted, they just can't seem to hold the pupil together, and it just collapses outwards. And so they continue with this. When you see a large pupil like that, that person has adrenal exhaustion. Also, it's also a person who has usually an overgrowth of yeast in their body. Large pupils usually have to do a yeast cleanse. Also, very interesting, it could be a person who has Epstein-Barr virus. Now, that just lies dormant in the adrenal glands. It won't really do anything until the person gets their immune system suppressed enough. They eat too much sugar, they stay up late too much, playing their video games or whatever. It's going to exhaust their adrenals even more, and they're prone to getting chronic fatigue or mononucleosis. An overstressed individual, when it starts, the pupil gets really tight like that. I mean, this person's really under a lot of stress to have a pupil that small. So if you see a large pupil or a real tight one, you know that they're under stress. This is another one we look at. All this white in an eye, that's indicative of a person who's under they have a lot of acidity build up in their body. So this is a typical arthritic person, a lot of muscle aches, joint pain, everything's stiff and sore. So they need to have an alkaline diet, stay off so much of the sugar and breads and pastas and things like that. Get your body a little bit more alkaline. This is a blood sugar metabolism imbalance. I talked about the orange and yellow before in a previous eye, but when you see a lot of orange in an eye, that's a person, as I said, they have a blood sugar metabolism imbalance, or often they have an intolerance to sugar. I wouldn't say an allergy, but their body just doesn't recognize sugar, and they need more amylase in their body. So when you see a lot of orange in an eye, they need to be taking an enzyme, amylase. Here's another indication of somebody, sorry, my fan just kicked on behind me. I hope you can still hear me. Here's another thing too. If you get someone to pull up their eyelid and look down, and you see these veins with the little bruises on the end of it like that, that is a blood sugar metabolism imbalance. That tells you right there, they're just not metabolizing sugar properly. All right. Calcium in metabolism imbalance. This person is really acidic, like I showed you earlier. So the more of an icy blue eye, that usually indicates that they have a problem with wheat or dairy allergies. They're not very good at breaking down wheat or dairy when you see a really pretty icy blue eye like this. But this is also an indication that they need protease, an enzyme protease to break down proteins. And that will help not to be so acidic. And if you see the person that we showed earlier with this ring around the periphery, that is usually a fat metabolism imbalance, especially when you see the fat build up in the eye. You see the corner of the eye in the sclera? That's fat. It's called the pinguicula. When you see a ring here and you see the fat there, that's usually an indicative sign that, or it's indicative that they have high cholesterol. So regardless, if you see fat in the sclera like that, a pinguicula, and you see this, they would do best with something called just lipase, the enzyme lipase. That'd be a good thing to suggest to them, because if they take lipase, it helps to break down fats much easier, okay? There's other things I can suggest. This is an interesting one. When you see vertical line here in the left side. Do not freak out and go look at in the mirror and start guessing at these lines in your eye. But when we see an obvious bright vertical line, that's a cardiac infarct diathesis, which means you're very prone to having a heart attack. And the brighter it is, this is in the left lateral side of the eye, left eye, right? The lateral means towards the ear. So when you see that ring, that vertical line there, it usually means they're very prone to having heart attack. Okay. If I see it on the right side, that's apoplexy diathesis, which means stroke potential. Okay. So when I see that vertical here on the right lateral side, if you see that, it usually means it runs in the family anyway, stroke. If you see the vertical on the left side, that means heart attack usually runs. But it depends on how dark red this is and how bright it is if this person's going to have a stroke or not. And if you see that, you say, you're going to go see that doctor right away and get checked out just to be on the safe side. You don't want to scare people half to death, but I've actually had a case once where I said, you need to go see a doctor right away. He says, why? I said, because you're about to have a massive heart attack. And I've only done that once. I'm not laughing when I say that. I just kind of snickered, but I wasn't laughing at the time. And I said, you need to see a doctor. And he went to see his doctor, and the doctor said, what? You went to an iridologist, and he says you're about to have a heart attack. And so the doctor snickered, and he had an intern with him, and they're sneering, and he says, okay, I'll listen to your heart. No, I can't feel anything wrong with your heart. What's wrong with you? Can't believe you listened to that hocus pocus. He says, well, he told me every single thing else that was right. How would he know about that? And then he told me I have to get my heart checked because I'm about to have a heart attack. Look, the only way I can book you an appointment to see a cardiologist, but it's going to be about a 6-month wait. He says, I don't have 6 months. He said it could be any day now. He says, well, the only way you could see a cardiologist right away is if you went to an emergency ward in a hospital and with a heart problem. He says, thank you. So he left and he went to talk to the receptionist there in the emergency ward. He says, my doctor said I'm about to have a heart attack. He didn't say medical doctor. So he was referring to me. And so they took him right away and they put him on a treadmill and they wanted to do a test. And they said, wow, oh, turn it off. You're going to give him a heart attack. He says, what? I don't know. Your heart is literally all over the place. We have to send you down the hall and we're going to do an MRI on your heart to find out what's going on. And when they came out, the cardiologist that met him afterwards had a white face and he says, I don't know how to tell you this. Your left vessel in your heart is 95% blocked. Your right one's 85% blocked. We don't know how you're still alive, but you're literally hours away from having a massive heart attack. Now, this is coming from the cardiologist. So they put him under the knife that afternoon and did a quadruple bypass. And he's really, really happy now, but he calls me Uncle Rob. He's in his 70s, but he calls me Uncle Rob, and his whole family has come to see me now. Now, I've never had to do that before, but at this point, I felt if you don't take this seriously, he could die. So, but I don't want you going around analyzing people, looking at their eyes. I just kind of filled you in on that. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. I just do say there is courses that's coming up, and well, Silva's going to give you a little bit more information on that, but it's going to be Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 9:30 IHN. I promise I'm the one teaching, but I'm not going to give homework. I know you have a lot on your plate. Most people have a lot on your plate, but I don't give homework, and it's going to be online. It tends to be a lot of fun based on all the practitioners I've had in the past. They said they really enjoyed the class, not because I'm teaching it, because iridology itself is very exciting. So you can learn the science and practice of iridology yourself. So I think we can probably take some question and answer now if you want. I'm going to put my video back on. There I am there. And I'm just waiting for Silva. There you are. Are you on there, Silva?
Okay. I am.
Go for it.
I am. Did you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, I guess I don't need to do that anymore.
That's great. We do have a few questions that we are going to get. We can get started with. So the first question for tonight is Can you see a change in the eye colors during pre-diabetic or any pre-stage of the disease?
Yes. Yeah. You will see. Now, I don't want anyone panicking if you see yellow or orange color in your eye. That does not mean you're going to get diabetes. But a person who is pre-diabetic will usually have something, even if it's the slightest speck of orange or yellow in an eye. So sometimes you can't see it from 3 feet away, but an iridologist will be able to see. If I see orange or yellow or brown color in an eye, I know they're struggling with blood sugar, but it's not up to us to diagnose. They have to get blood tested properly from a doctor.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, why isn't this the scope of ophthalmology? I know that they can see certain diseases and onset like diabetes and refer out.
Well, that's the question of the century. Around the world, they do it. They don't do it in North America. It's frustrating. I know the pharmaceutical companies are working with a lot of medical doctors, and they want to be able to solve things with the pharmaceutical side of things, the allopathic medicine, and don't really care too much about natural medicine interfering with what they're doing. So it's not really widely accepted here. We're basically the testing ground for the pharmaceutical companies. That's not a put down, it's a fact. They do want to test the validity of their drugs to reduce symptom rates and things. But a lot of parts of the world, it's very well known. There's iridologists that could tell you a lot about things because they use it throughout doctors' offices, medical institutions, hospitals, whatever around the world. But unfortunately, it's just not here.
Thank you. Next question is what is the instrument that you use for iridology?
Well, I'm going to try to spin this around so you can see my camera. So if you want to see this, you see that? That's my camera, my iridology camera. And it's got a great macro lens on it. And the person would put their head here, and you would actually take a photo of their eye. Now, that's for people who are more serious about iridology. Beginners can have a scope very similar to this. As you can see, it's lighted on one side. So when I put it up to an eye, I can see pretty much, you won't be able to see that, but you can see a lot of things when you're actually looking at an eye. Some people, because of the whole COVID thing, might not want to go right up close to somebody, and they may want to use a camera like I do here. Now we're both wearing masks. I tend not to breathe when I'm looking at someone's eye really quickly, but that's what it is. That's roughly around $70 for a scope like that. Camera's a little bit more than $70. I think this one, particularly with the whole setup here, was about $4,000. So,
okay. There is a couple questions about the course, some of the logistic and registration questions. I'm going to take note of them, and I can respond to them so that we can get to some. Because I want to be sure that we can get to the questions relating to the webinar. So the next one is, this is an interesting one. This individual asks, I've had pain in my right eye from a whiplash injury. I go for treatment, but could an iridologist be able to know exactly what muscle or nerve was affected? I go to osteopath. It will go away and then return. Do you think there is treatment for this?
Well, see, iridology is more of a diagnostic or an analysis, but it's not actually going to see exactly what nerve it is. You can see if nerves in the neck are inflamed. You can see if there is a vertebrae in the neck. You can see if it's muscle related. You can see if it's vertebral related, or you can see if it's nerve related. But it won't tell you exactly what vertebrae, unfortunately, but you'll just be able to look at it and say, what is going on with the left side of your neck? And it may not be the right side, it may be the left side. So you can tell what side it is, and you can say you need to get that checked. That's about all we can do. So we can't really get into tell you exactly what nerve or anything like that.
Thank you. The next question is, if you address these issues with the protocol, will it change the color or topography of the eye?
Wow, good questions. Yeah, I've got a book of before and after photos 6 months after. I was showing someone the other day and their jaw hit the floor. I said, I cannot believe people's eyes changed that much. And it's not common for someone to go, well, I used to have a brown eye, now I got a blue eye. It's nothing like that. But you can see the colors lighten as they cleanse and things like that. As they go through different emotional changes and healing, you'll see the eye color change as well. But I don't think you'll ever go from a true brown eye to a true blue eye. That's impossible. You would never go from a brown eye to a hematogenic eye, or I should say to a biliary, a mixed eye, or from a brown or biliary to a blue. But you will see changes as far as a green hue, orange hue, yellow, things like that change in the eye. Yes, and they do fade within short periods of time too.
Well, that's it for the questions. So thank you so much, Rob, for giving up your time in support of your mission, and we are just so thankful for your incredible wisdom. And as Rob mentioned, there is a course coming up in Iridology. There is information within on IHN's website if you'd like to check that out. And you can certainly connect with a member of the IHN team or reach out to Rob for further information for the course. But again, Rob, thank you so much for your time. And I hope everyone has a wonderful remainder of your evening. Again, thank you so much. Take good care.